Hello, and thank you for joining us for a Westwood Trust Creative Chat. My name is Claire Williamson, and I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement at Performing Arts Houston. To describe myself and my surroundings, I'm a white woman with long brown hair pulled back and dark rimmed glasses. I'm wearing a gray and black patterned top, and there's a white wall behind me. Before we delve into the conversation, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the many Indigenous communities that have long used and continue to use this land as a living and gathering space. Performing Arts Houston's offices in Jones Hall are located on ancestral land traversed by the Karankawa, Atakapa Ishak, Sana, Kwawitakan, and Alabama Coushatta people. These Indigenous communities have been and continue to be driving forces in shaping the culture and economy of our region. We acknowledge these communities to offer recognition and respect for their lived experience and to broaden awareness of the forces that have led to this moment. I am so thrilled to be hosting this conversation between Kyle Abraham and Harrison Guy. Harrison Guy has captivated audiences across the nation through his inspirational and unique works of passion, beauty, and activism that are rooted in African American history and culture. He began his dance journey in the small town of Lamarck, Texas, and building on his love for social dance and hip hop, he affirmed his purpose and calling by studying dance at Prairie View A&M University. He continued his studies at various regional and national companies. He was a founding member of both Exclamation Dance and Darrell Martin's Dance Fusion in Houston. In 2004, he debuted his dance company, Urban Souls Dance Company, in the citywide dance festival Dance Houston. Harrison has really gained a reputation for creating soul-stirring works that shift the consciousness of the audience and inspire response. He was the inaugural artist in residence at Rice University through the CERCL department, where he presented a project for Black students and community called Black Bodies in White Spaces. He's won numerous awards, which include Best Choreography for his work as movement director with Rec Room's presentation of the Royale. He's the founder of the Charles Law Community Archive through the Black LGBTQ History and Heritage Project with the African American Library at the Gregory School. Harrison has taught dance for 18 years at campuses throughout Houston, including the High School for the Visual and Performing Arts. And he's the Director of Arts and Culture for the Fifth Ward Community Redevelopment Corporation, as well as an inaugural awardee of Performing Arts Houston's Houston Artist Commissioning Project. Kyle Abraham and his choreography have been featured widely in publications. He's created numerous works for companies across the United States, and he's received many awards, including being named MacArthur Fellow in 2013. Kyle is a visiting professor in residence at UCLA and artistic director of AIM by Kyle Abraham, the internationally acclaimed New York-based dance company. The mission of AIM is to create an evocative, interdisciplinary body of work. Born into hip hop culture in the late 1970s and grounded in Kyle Abraham's artistic upbringing in classical cello, piano, and the visual arts, the goal of the movement is to delve into identity in relation to personal history. The work entwines a sensual and provocative vocabulary with a strong emphasis on sound, human behavior, and all things visual in an effort to create an avenue for personal investigation and exposing all of that on stage. AIM is a representation of dancers from various disciplines and diverse personal backgrounds. Combined together, these individualities create movement that is manipulated and molded into something fresh and unique. An Untitled Love is one of AIM's latest works and is a Performing Arts Houston co-commission. Set to the music of R&B singer D'Angelo, the work serves as a creative exaltation centered on the often overlooked love and unity that exist within the Black community. It is designed to honor Kyle's family and celebrate love within his community. Performing Arts Houston presents An Untitled Love in Houston on May 6th, 2022. Welcome, Kyle Abraham and Harrison Guy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hello.
All right. Hello, Kyle Abraham, the Kyle Abraham. I'm so excited to talk to you again today. The last conversation we had hit all my sweet spots. We're talking about Blackness and love and HBCUs and D'Angelo. And so it was hitting all my sweet spots. So I'm really happy to kind of pick up and dive in a little bit more. I know the piece that everyone's excited about is an untitled love, but I titled our talk today A Radical Love because, what kind of stood out to me is and why I loved our last talk was because it was talking about love in places that maybe people don't expect, or maybe we just don't talk about it enough, right? So I think that people may be surprised to know how deep the love goes at HBCUs and how that experience is so different. And, Black relationships get a lot of, assumptions. And I think that talking about, your family love, talking about love for dance, Black dance, I think those are things that we don't talk about a lot. People don't hear a lot about. So I think they're radical in that way that people just don't hear about them enough. So I'm thinking about radical love as I talk about this today. And so I kind of want to start off with you and just what I really like about you is when you explain your work and you're talking about, it being a gumbo. So even to use the word gumbo, I think is just so specific. Even though a gumbo has all these things in it, and I know what you're trying to get at there. I think the choice to use the word gumbo just says so much about you. And the times I've seen you talk, the times that I've seen you talk about your work, it just feels like you're so sure. And I can only imagine in something like, something like the way the dance, as a discipline, as a genre, our family of dance and dancers, how it functions. I can only imagine what the journey to being, a Black, gay, queer man in this space, and be and exuding this self-love that is just really awesome to watch. I can only imagine that journey. But what would you say about that journey to where you are today? And am I right in what I'm experiencing from you, the way I experience it? Is it a profound sense of self-love?
I think that is, I mean, that's amazing because I think I started laughing because I think so many people around me catch up on my indecisiveness, but it's rooted in just care, because I care so much about people, about this world, about art, that it makes making choices that much more powerful and profound, and that responsibility is so daunting all of the time. And I thank you for that kindness. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think the one thing that I really came to understand around the time that we had already been touring this work, and we were doing it at BAM, at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, here in Brooklyn, which is where I am right now on Lenape land. And I was just thinking to myself, regardless of whether or not I'm dating anyone right now, I'm actually really happy with myself. And it was this beautiful kind of irony, because when I started making an Untitled Love, I thought about making people assume that it was solely about Black love, but it's more than that. The work was meant to be about self-love. And I had all these different ideas of things I wanted to play with, kind of having Catherine Kirk, who's one of the leads in the show. She's probably on the poster for our engagement with you all. But I was having her be like a talk show host, and like doing all these different just activities in rehearsal to kind of like play with this idea to ultimately get someone or an audience to think about themselves in that way. And then I think there's this element of like, I think naturally there's a sense of pride that people will experience when they see this work. I think we as a people will feel happy, will feel empowered, will feel sexy. And I think for me, making this work and doing it here recently in the more recent tours, I'm like, yeah, I actually feel really good. I'm very happy with where my life is. I'm happy with the choices I'm able to make in my life. I'm happy with the challenging decisions, and know that like there are beautiful risks on either side. And to know that they are bountiful is part of that beauty. And to know that they are delicate is also part of that beauty.
I love that. I love that so much. So the short answer for me that I got from that is yes.
I'm so long-winded.
No, I love all of that. I love all of it. But no, I was like, I at first I thought you were gonna say that, you pulling the curtain back, right? It's like, no, It ain't there. But what
Right.
I'm hearing you say is, is absolutely right what I'm experiencing from you. And even though there's this indecisiveness, that those choices are made deliberately, right? And that that's really, really beautiful to hear. I can imagine like a journey to self-love kind of has these categories. So I'm thinking about this in like if you had to answer, if you're in thinking about your journey to where you are today, what you just explained, what stands out as a pivotal moment as the young Kyle, like the boy Kyle? What do you think played a part in getting you to the next step of that journey as young as you can remember? Are there things that you remember?
Well, I think ironically that's part of the beauty in, the course of the pandemic was a doozy for so many people, but it allowed me to think back to the person that I liked the most in me and the time that I felt the most comfortable and confident. And I think that was before I had to consider other people's thoughts and opinions about me, um, and when I felt my most free. And how can I sit and dance in joy, and allow that to be more of the story and more of what I share? How can I consider this element of support that much more in my life? To get more to the question more directly, I think I don't know. I think in that innocent way of like being kicked out of Catholic school the first day for dancing, whatever that day was before I got kicked out, just the freedom that existed in that youth, or just like, you know, me going to my parents and telling them about the things that I was interested in, and not feeling like there was going to be judgment because I was interested in anything, if it was arts or anything, business, etc. I think there was always this sense of support there. So I think, yeah, all of these different time markers, first grade, middle school, high school, all these things. There's these moments where I felt free and I felt supported by my parents in particular, who, they're no longer with me, but I think I know that they have set me up to feel empowered and to feel worthy.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I said last time we don't talk enough about, the parents that do give that kind of foundation to boys like you and I. To have that foundation is so amazing. And that's again that radical part of that love that I'm thinking about in thinking about the last time you said that. I love to hear you talk about your family. So that's boy Kyle Young. And I'm gonna ask you also in thinking about kind of like coming to terms with queerness and that part of your identity. Is there as we're on this journey to self-love, is there a moment around queerness identity in that you feel like got you to a self-love kind of place?
Just the hard ones. I don't know. Well, I think the thing is, it's all so layered, right? Because I think I even think back to being at Morgan State and meeting my one of my closest friends, Darrell Grand Moultrie, fellow choreographer, meeting him our freshman year in college.
Like
Um,
one of
yeah,
my favorites.
yeah, amazing. He was at Towson State University, and I was at Morgan, but we were dancing together a couple nights out of the week at Morgan and taking classes with the wonderful Stephanie Powell in Baltimore. And I remember talking to him on the phone, one of our first times, like talking on the phone, and me identifying as queer. And he was like, "Oh, don't say that." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "That means like strange or weird." I was like it just was like this weird thing for me, thinking about these terms, and also seeing the way he navigated through this world, being like a Black queer New Yorker who went to the LaGuardia High School for the Performing Arts, and me coming from a city like Pittsburgh, but being immersed in, like zine culture and writing for my friends zines about being queer when I was 15, and just and listening to singers like and songwriters like Morrissey and the Smiths, and listening to Prince. One artist is constantly talking about their celibacy but still thinking about love and longing. The other one writing and thinking about a very kind of sexual catalog, one that also celebrates religion and just ideas of love. So all of that is part of that story and that narrative to kind of understand and find my queerness and find that kind of like that joy in those like high school to adult years. Because I think there's still a lot to unpack to kind of as we become adults, I think so many more insecurities actually develop, which is a really complicated thing. But I think maybe not hoping not to tangent us, but I think part of it is also this idea of how do we want to be remembered, right? Especially, nothing is promised. Tomorrow is not promised. The rest of this day isn't promised. So what can I put forth in this world? What brings me joy? And how can I surround myself around that? Or how can I cultivate that for myself? I think those are the ways that kind of I'd like to think are grounding me and making me feel that much more kind of connected to both my queerness or to just the way in which I love and want to share love.
Yeah, I love that. And then I'm gonna ask you, I know you mentioned sexiness earlier, which got
Hey.
me thinking about the D'Angelo music. You have to you can't pretend like that's not sexy music, right? So that got me to thinking about just intimacy and love as well. And so I'm wondering around um, your journey to self-love with other people, like intimately. Like, is there a pivotal moment that, because you know how when you're journeying to think about who you're going to be with a partner or intimately, you go through all these, where you want to land, where where you end up, and I'm sure it's ever changing. But is there a moment that's shaping and maybe shows up in the work, maybe not, that you think about?
Well, I think ultimately this idea of just vulnerability and
Mm,
trust are the most kind of like vulnerability is like the most profoundly sensual thing that there is. Yeah, I just I think there's just something about just that openness, the surrender that can happen. And I think in this work, I mean, and with D'Angelo's music, I think ironically, I mean, that's part of the irony of like a video like Untitled, How Does It Feel, right? Which so many people, I think talked about the sexiness. But for me, ironically, it was always the vulnerability, which as we're talking now, we're talking about how those things are in tandem. But
mhm.
I think there was just something so heartfelt and guttural and real and stripped away, pun intended, I guess, that I felt connected to. And it never was sexual per se for me, which not to say that it's anything wrong with people who found it to be sexual, but that's kind of how I took it. But in the same way, there are some of those songs, just a bass groove or just the lyrics, we're teaching a new dancer, actually, who make their premiere in Houston. We're teaching her the choreography and talking about the lyrics and saying, okay, well, this happens on this lyric here, and listening to the lyrics of a song like Lady. And, I was joking with D'Angelo himself backstage after the show, talking about those lyrics. I was like, listen, I'm a gay man, but like, there's something about the way you were singing that song that I felt like I could relate. And I think like some of my dancers laughed, but I don't think they really understood what I was saying. It's not that I felt like he was singing that song to me. I felt like I was someone like D'Angelo singing these lyrics. Don't think I don't see them looking at you. All of them wishing they could have you. They say that you're the talk of the town. Everybody wants to know what's going down. Like, babe, I've never seen this before. Like these lyrics, like they're conversational, but they're so real. And the way in which he's going about singing that song, it's so sly,
Mhm.
and so it's sexy in a way that's, I think, not to be that person of that generation that says things like, the music nowadays,
Mhm.
like you don't have to use all the expletives to actually make poetry and make connections to words and to music and to a feeling.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, he had entendres. There's just artistry to what he was doing. And I hope that a work like An Untitled Love can celebrate that and can make people who are songwriters like listen to those lyrics and be like, this is art, y'all.
Yeah, for sure. And in mentioning like vulnerability, do you feel like working on pieces that have music and lyrics, because a lot of time we do things that don't have any lyrics to kind of lean on or to lean into, if you will. But do you feel like because vulnerability is a part of those kind of lyrics, do you feel like that allows it to be in the room dance wise? And as you're working on the choreography, do you think the dancers tap into that same vulnerability in a way?
Yeah, I really hope so. We do so much work talking about love and joy and black love and black joy in particular, but just love and joy and family and relationships. That I'd like to think that everyone in the room is really taking the time to listen to and unpack the lyrics to all of these songs.
Awesome. I love that. And I have one more question about self-love, and then I'll move on to a different kind of love. But I'm so curious because earlier you said you used the phrase when I feel most free earlier.
Mhm.
And we kind of raced by it. And I think that is it just stood out to me. And so I'm really, really curious to know, when do you feel the most free?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm open book. I think
Absolutely.
I think that's a challenge actually right now in certain spaces and certain times because I feel the weight of responsibility on me to make everyone else around me feel supported and feel seen. And um it sometimes can feel like it just feels heavy. It feels very heavy
Mhm.
a lot of the time. So I don't really know, honestly, at my age, when I feel most free. And it's going to sound really sad to say when I'm dreaming, but I actually think that when I go to rest and I can actually shut everything down, that's one of those times. Um, I think when I can allow myself the space to actually um, be with friends and just laugh and play spades and play like board games that I have around my house. Like those opportunities are very few and far between.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think it's one of those interesting conundrums, right? To like acknowledge that I have a lot of possibility um, based on either resources or opportunity, but there's another weight to all of that because I have to consider all of these other things before I can step into or fly away to any of those things.
Mhm.
But when I get those moments to be with friends, aka family, that those moments can feel the most free if I can allow myself, of course, to do that, and
Yeah.
not even think about, oh, is my outfit okay? Is my outfit cute when I'm hanging out with these friends? Because I know
Mhm.
they're gonna want to take a group picture, like stuff like that. Like, oh, but can I just let that go? And it is very very challenging for someone like me to let everything go all the time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you said AKA family because family is what I wanted to ask you about next.
Sure.
And love of family. I've heard you talk about your family, quite a bit, and I think we have very, very similar families. And so, when you think about love of or love for family, like who comes up? Like who shows up in thinking about family love?
I mean, my parents for sure. My mother was my best friend. My best Judy.
Mhm.
um, I it's one of those things that's interesting to me navigating having a company and working with dancers because there's that moment where you're hanging out as friends and then something happens and you're like, oh wait, we're boss employer or employee kind of vibe. And like knowing that like with my mother, it never necessarily felt that way with me and her. Like we could joke, but I always had that level of respect and we had that repartee where we could joke about anything and everything. There are very adult things that she would tell me, and I'm like, well, Mom, that's too much. But there was just so much love and respect there. And I think maybe that's part of what, I hope to do with a lot of my work and with this work in particular is I'm thinking about the stories that she and her friends would share and they would allow me to be in the room. It's almost as if I went to Central State University and was living in Wilberforce, Ohio with my parents, or growing up with them. I just feel so connected to their stories. And it is people like Darrell Moultrie. We were just texting a little while ago. This is someone who, I know that there never has to be a veil when we're talking.
Mhm.
I know that whatever I say, and the same thing applied to my mother as well. There was never a sense of judgment. There's never a sense of judgment. I think you can question someone and question your he can question me, vice versa. But it's not because we think we're, whatever the person's saying is bad or with ill will or malintent or anything. It's just these are people that I want to have in my life or had in my life who can tell me when there's something in my eye because they want me to look my best and be my best, or they can tell me when the thing I said or did could have been better. I think that's really important for people to really understand. People who are around you, who won't tell you when something you're doing is not right, are not actually part of the story of your success. And they should not ever take credit for any of your success. It's the people that are around you that will say to you, I think you could have said that, you could have framed that better, and let me tell you how. Let me show you how. So it's not just like calling you out, but also like, let's talk about that thing. And those people are the people that I think are family. The people that will share with me, they will tell me their history, they'll open up to me. They also will make the space for me to share my history and my stories with them as well.
Awesome. I really like in thinking about family, and you mentioned your parents earlier. I really like the demonstration of love that you saw between your parents. I know that you were closer to your mother, and again, that's a similarity. Even with you said that you would have to, say, "Mom, that's too much." I relate. I relate. I relate. I think it is so awesome that you were able to see a demonstration of love between your mom and dad. So you want to speak about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and that's even complicated actually at times. And my father and I should say, ironically, we became closer when I started dancing.
Mhm.
That's when he saw this passion in me and really wanted to support that. Would pick me up and take me to class, and take me home, pick me up, take me home after work or class or whatever. But my father, for people that may not know, he had an early onset of dementia and Alzheimer's, and in addition to also developed aphasia, so wasn't able to really speak much at all. And in his last years, the only things that he could say, sometimes he could say yes, sometimes he could say no, but he could always tell my mother he loved her. He could always do that. And that was heartbreaking for her, because it's like, how could she kind of continue to build her strength watching someone else in their weakest moments, and feel empowered and feel strong watching someone deteriorate right in front of you, and know that like this person loves you, but like they're fading away. And I just think there's so much to that. And I think you see that also in a work of mine like the Radio Show, which is from 2010, where there's moments where one the in more of a traditional way, you see the male dancer helping the female dancer down to the ground, but then in one moment they just switch and she starts leading him down to the ground. And I think a big part of that for me had to do with this notion, or my mother used to tell me, a lot of times the caregiver is the one that goes first, because people aren't thinking about all that they're putting on themselves to take care of this other person. And although my father passed for my mother, I was definitely seeing the toll that care was taking on her and on them. But there was so much love and so much just care and laughter. And I think they both had such really beautiful friend circles. It's in some of those friend circles you'll see kind of characterizations of in An Untitled Love, for sure. For sure. Yeah, they're a great group of folks. I think they loved having people over. I think they just loved to share love and to welcome people and to make space for each other and for me and my sister as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, again, that radical love of like, I get that sense of community from those people gathering around and sharing. And I absolutely love that. It reminds me so much of our culture, right? Of how I think of Black people. Oftentimes, I see in my world the difference in ethnicities and other groups is that Black people are very communal. To me, it feels instinctual to be about grouping, even if it's a small group, like, coworkers who, fish fry on Friday nights, or your church, you create these sub kind of groups, but community is really big. And so through those communities, the culture shows up. And I would imagine there are some motifs or some kind of settings that show up in your work, that celebrates both that community and culture nature of our people. And so I'm just wondering, when you think about love of Black culture and love of community, what comes to mind?
Oh Lord, I think some of it is reflection. Some of it is are those like fun nods to things that are very specifically us. I made a work, which I won't say what it is because I don't want it to be a spoiler, but not this work. There's another work that I made more recently where there's a moment of Diane Carroll's first entrance in Dynasty, and it's
Mm,
for us.
mhm,
And we know when that happens, why that's there. Other
mhm.
people may not know it. I'm okay with that. But yeah, in the choreography, there's moments of a pound, there's moments of, a nene, these things, even in New York City Ballet, making the runaway, those moments are there for us to see ourselves in the work and to kind of really push the culture that much more to the front.
I love that. Have you always been okay with, because I think that choosing to give moments that are specifically for us, especially in audiences where we may not be predominant, right? In an audience, or even dance companies where we may not be predominant. Have you always been like, you know, having that kind of empowerment to say, oh, this is what it is, and this is gonna be here. Have you always been like that as a choreographer?
I think so. I'd like to think so. I mean, as early as I can imagine, I think that's always been a thing. I don't know if it's subliminal blackness. I don't know. I don't know. But it's yeah. I think I'd like to think those things are always there. Like even mixing like Chopin with Maury Springer or something like or it was Jerry Springer in the Maury show. Like, but like playing with it because there are these things that like we can connect to in a way that like they're not about it's not about what's the word objectifying us or
Appropriating in a way.
appropriate well not appropriating because it's very us but or commercialization of our culture or anything like that. It's not that, but there's always I think just a fun experience for me to kind of like make sure that we are very present wherever the space is that I'm able invited to make work.
Yeah, I love that. And and I think about when I was asking the question about where we're not predominant, and in the room, and we still make those choices, that I think are very interesting and radical choices to make. I'm wondering what comes to mind when I ask about your love for dance itself, just dancing.
Oh, I mean, ironically, I feel like even just putting that ing there changes my answer. I
Hmm.
think the ing makes me think about my experience growing up in the clubs and going to like raves and being in like hip hop and house parties and stuff like that. Because ironically, that's like other kind of freedom. Like I could care less what anybody else was doing. I just was
Hmm.
like, give me a corner space. Y'all go off and do your thing. I'm just gonna just have my vibe and feel great. But dance, it can be different in that way. I remember sitting like maybe two seats away from Laverne Cox at New York City Ballet Gala, and hearing her like every couple of seconds going like and I think like and granted it's funny because that's my sense of humor, but it also is that thing that like dance is what I connect to doesn't have to be what you connect to, and
Hmm.
doesn't have to be the thing that someone who, is from a totally different community connects with. I think that's the beauty of the form. But more importantly, it's not that like dance doesn't have to be this thing where you get it or you don't get it. It's the thing that you see and you experience. And that is enough. That's powerful in its own right. Um, yeah, I think that's all I got to say there. I know I could keep tangenting us.
No, no, I love that. We are here to hear from you, so it's all good. Yeah, I recognize that from Laverne Cox. I've experienced that,
Yeah,
as well as like she's always in church.
yeah,
So
I love it. I love
yeah, I love it too. I
it.
absolutely love it. I love the distinction you made between dance and dancing too, because I think that's a powerful distinction, right? Like you said, you kind of, I saw a light go off when you recognized the ing that perhaps was not there for the just the dance part. So I love that kind of that separation was there as well.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because I think for whatever reason, there there's something held there with the word dance as well. Like I think of insecurities, I think of people's perception. When I think of dancing, that's not even part of the equation at all. It
Right.
just feels limitless and freeing.
I love
Although
that.
maybe painful right now. Knee
Yeah.
pads,
It,
stop.
especially for the dancing you do, absolutely painful.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the piece of you in the white skirt.
Oh
And
yeah,
I
I'm thinking Pookie Jenkins.
Yes, and I was just like, who is this person and what is inside? I would love to spend, some time in your head. I just knew you were a brilliant person just by the choices you were making and the way your body moved. So
Oh,
I
thank
love
you.
that. So I want to ask you real quickly though about because for where you are in your career, for you to have a company still is interesting, I think, because you have such a strong sense of Kyle Abraham, the Kyle Abraham, I like to always say. You have to love having a company or having a company environment in order to keep it going, right? Because that's another choice. And so I'm just wondering about that choice for you.
Yeah, I don't know if it's there's I don't have a finite answer about that really. Yeah, I love the dancers. I love what we are doing. I love what we represent. But I definitely do struggle sometimes, especially given this all of the change that a lot of people have experienced or you've witnessed other people experiencing over the last 2 years. Um, you know, how are we making spaces for ourselves to actually really enjoy our lives?
Mhm.
And it's something that I just struggle with a little bit because I think one of the beautiful things I realized is, you know, just because I love everyone in the company, everyone I work with, doesn't mean that that's all I want to do every day and every second of the day. And I'm sure that's how they feel too. Like where's my spa retreat? I got it. I had some time off, which I haven't been. I wish I could go to a spa. But I think the thing is more, yeah, I'm trying to really understand this balance. I'm also thinking it's like at the age that I'm at now, and thinking about my parents or my friends who have retirement plans. What does that even mean? I started establishing one, but do I ever get to use those funds? Is there not only a retirement, but like, is there a point when I have more space for me? And does that mean that I would not be able to continue to make and be creative? I
Mhm.
don't know, because I think it's tricky because of the level of responsibility. But then I also look at certain dancers, not going to name any name, or choreographers, not going to name names when I'm with this statement, because I think there's that moment, right, where you're like, maybe the work's not as good as it was. Maybe I should not be dancing on stage in front of a paid audience. Like those things are very real. And maybe I'm too vain and maybe a little too insecure to like, for me to, I'm just trying to unpack some of those things.
Mhm.
Because when the work doesn't, for me, I guess when I don't feel like it's at its best, I think there's something I need to really reevaluate. And I
Mhm.
feel that way even though I'm not at my best dancing shape, I do think there's still things that I want to share with an audience in this vessel.
Mhm.
Um, but I do need to be conscious and aware of things that may not look as strong as they did before, and also what doesn't feel as good as
Mhm.
it did before.
Yeah, truly thinking about that evolution kind of with aging and all those kinds of things. That's always an interesting conversation in dance because we rely on our bodies for our art form.
Yeah.
Very interesting. You mentioned earlier when I asked you about when you felt most free and freedom, you mentioned the weight and responsibility that you feel sometimes. And I wanted to know specifically around that. And you may not have been thinking about this when you said that, but I did want to ask you about the weight of kind of being Kyle Abraham, right? Like you are this kind of dance figure that has really grown in prominence and people wanting you, and also in some spaces now getting in spaces, to be the first like Black person to be in spaces. And so with that access, oftentimes comes a weight, if you will. And so I'm just wondering, just thoughts around that, the weight that comes with that level of access.
Yeah. This ain't therapy. This is therapy. Where's that like PhD or MD? um, I don't know. I think maybe in some cases I feel that particular type of weight and responsibility when it pertains to these ideas of the first, second, third, etc. I don't think it's going to feel different until everything is just blown and we're just in a totally different type of space where the count is no longer there or relevant. But aside from that, I don't know. I think maybe part of that weight and things can be there for me because I actually don't like, even when you say the Kylie Brand, like I don't even I find like I don't know what that even means. Like I was shopping for something earlier this afternoon and the guy at the store knew my name and I was like, how is this possible? But yeah, I don't see myself in any kind of way. I just think that I just always want to do my best and make my best. And I know that there's always someone new in the audience who does not either know me or know the work. And even when people do know me or know the work, they don't know where I'm at, and they don't know, where I want to go. And so you have to be really vulnerable to actually do that and to push yourself and to show people the new sides of who you are. That Lauryn Hill Unplugged album, which I feel like I quote all the time. She's like, "This is the first time y'all are meeting me." And I think that that's actually in a lot of ways the way that I feel in not only every new space, but every time I'm even at a venue that I've presented work at prior. Unless the expectation is to not have expectations, I don't know how people are really coming and seeing and taking in the work with fresh eyes and a fresh heart and just being open to whatever the experience is without any kind of expectation.
Yeah, that's so clear. Thank you for that. I have to talk about Ulysses Dove
Yeah.
because we both share that that love for his choreography. And I read when you said, and I say this so often, so it's so funny to read that you said this, but I was like, just imagine had he been allowed to create more, what would we have and what would he be creating today? I feel the same way because it was just so genius and so amazing what he did, with the bodies when he was here to create. And so I share my love for Ulysses Dove. I know you mentioned that you're inspired by him and that in your kind of way, this is the work is kind of in tribute in some way, just personally. And so I just want to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of that people might have seen in this new work called The Weathering that I made for the Royal Ballet, premiered just I don't know, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And I think maybe part of that also finds its way into an Untitled Love in the sense that, like, you look at things like urban folk dance, or you look at these works that are seen now, I think, in a lot of ways on not only the Ailey Company, but Philadelphia as well, or our Dayton Contemporary Dance, who, I don't think often gets credit for actually premiering Vespers or originating Vespers before it went over to Ailey. But I just want to continue to find ways to celebrate our culture and know that there's nothing monolithic in the way that we are sharing and presenting who we are and how we can be. And I think that you really see in his work, you see in the breadth of the work. I think, it's very clear, these references to a church experience, which to me are also, I think, like, there's a moment in Untitled Love that for me it's like my Vespers, not my Vespers, it's my Ulysses Dove moment, but maybe it's my Vespers Ulysses Dove moment, because I'm thinking about church, I'm thinking about the beauty shop, I'm thinking about these certain spaces for predominantly for Black women in particular, and think about my relationship in those spaces, but just thinking culturally how certain gestures or small things that I know are, to me, only really connected to our culture. Like I have a lot of white friends. I even went to Hebrew school, but like I never saw anyone outside of like Black spaces when someone takes a piece of gum and then someone tries to get a piece of gum and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to split this in half. And then you don't want to have a piece of gum, like I want the whole piece, that whole experience. And you see some of that in the work. And I think you would see that, in its very abstracted way, you'd see a lot of that in Ulysses Dove's works. There's that really beautiful Charlie Rose special that people can still access today. I think that's on YouTube. It's one of the rare things of Mr. Dove talking and being interviewed that you can find online.
Yeah, I've watched it a million times. I love when it says, the body, you're supposed to make the body sing. And I'm just like, yes, like I can see that in his work and in yours too. So I definitely wanted to mention him because we share our love for him and the work that he was able to give us in the short time that he was here with us. And so I know you said this was like therapy, so I'm gonna take a little pivot here. And I love that you said, that you really wanted this to be about joy, that you really wanted to just joy for joy's sake, right? And just celebrate love. And so I want to talk about the joy that shows up in this work as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think so much of that is the community vibe that we show in the work. This work is, I feel like, yeah, maybe I think Siobhan Burke, who interviewed me for the Times, I think, she connected to the rom-com element of it. And I think for me, there's something about this work that has a bit of like, if Sanaa Lathan was making dance theater, maybe that's what an Untitled Love is. I think a lot about a lot of the films that we've seen her in, films like Brown Sugar, Something's Gotta Give, Love and Basketball. There's that moment of not only levity, but also just like depth and community that I think just sparks joy. And a lot of that I think is really what I was hoping for. There's just moments for laughs. I think the dancers laugh. I laugh at them at times and with them at times. And the space is there for an audience to do the same.
I absolutely love that. I'm so excited about that. And as we wrap up, is there anything additional you want to say about the work or anything we talked about today? Love and radical love and all the things. My goodness, we have hit on a lot of different things.
Yeah, I'm definitely not trying to pander, but I just feel like Houston is such a really amazing like space for just art and culture. And I know so many like Black and brown people who've come from Houston and white folks as well who've come from Houston in these art circles. And I just want them to be at the show. And not only do I want them to be at the show, I want to make time to get to know them, because I also just want to know, it's like, what's in that water? Like what is there for there to be, a Robert Glasper or, there's just so many great dancers as well. Roderick George, a good friend of mine, I'm like, how does a dancer, like, what are they teaching in Houston to make, or help artists like these artists to kind of like just be so full and so nuanced and so fearless. It's something about the city. So I hope I can tap into that or find wherever that well is, get a couple sips.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that Houston kind of like, taught its always talking about its diversity and how we have all these different flavors and different types of people here. And I think that's so true. And I think we truly come in multitudes. One of the things that I love is the access to just diversity, right? And so you can have a Black centered thing or space or company, but it's influenced by these other things, and that's allowed, right? That's okay. And so I think that that makes us stronger and more powerful and makes someone like a Roderick George look like Roderick George, is because you have all these influences that you've that have played into your experience. And so I watched his journey as a dancer. So I think that the diversity definitely plays a part of that. So I'm happy to hear you say that. And so I want to just end by saying that something I read that I thought, and we was talking about this with this joy part, but when you said that the show emerged from a desire not to ignore painful realities, but to highlight the beauty in our culture, the way we love, and the way we love on each other. I love that you mentioned not ignoring the painful realities. Because sometimes people can feel like, oh, you're pretending like, things are not as bad as they seem because you're focusing on this other thing. But you said not to ignore that. But what is also true is that we have joy, we love each other, we love on each other, and that's a radical kind of love. And so I'm just so happy that I got to talk to you again twice, like talk about twice in a lifetime experience. So I'm really excited that I got to speak to you again. Excited for people to see the show. I know all those people are going to be there, if nothing else, but to hear that sexy D'Angelo music. And so I'm just excited about the show. And thank you so much for creating the work and
Hey.
sharing the work with us here in Houston.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I hope tell people to come on time. We're gonna have good music playing for a pre-show. We got the vibes going.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much, Kyle, for making the time, and thank you so much, Harrison. That was just like such a beautiful curation of topics.
Yeah, now it's acting weird.
Kyle, we are so excited to have you in Houston.
All right,
Awesome.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Well, I think that's about all we have time for today. Thank you to everyone for joining us virtually and engaging with us during this conversation. And thank you to our program sponsor, Westwood Trust. A huge thank you to Kyle Abraham for making time to be here with us today, and to Harrison Guy for being such an amazing interviewer. Make sure to save the date for AIM by Kyle Abraham performing An Untitled Love on May 6th at 7:30 p.m. in the Cullen Theater at the Wortham Center. Tickets are available on our website at performingartshouston.org. We'll see you then.